The morning light slid softly through the blinds of the small kitchen in Maple Ridge, a quiet suburban pocket just outside St. Louis, Missouri. The air smelled of toast and coffee, the ordinary scent of life that had not yet fractured. Anna Whitmore, 38, moved carefully between the counter and the table, her movements habitual, her mind already halfway through the day's chores. Her husband, Daniel, sat at the table in his uniform shirt, sleeves rolled up, the local construction company's logo stitched above the heart. "Coffee's stronger today," he said, with a half-smile she used to fall in love with years ago. "I figured you'd need it," Anna replied. "Forecast says it's going to hit 90 again." It was June 14th, 2007, a Thursday that began like every other, the kind that never warns you it will become a date carved into memory. Their marriage had drifted into routine, comfortable, predictable, safe. Daniel left before sunrise most days, and Anna managed a small flower shop she'd inherited from her mother. Their only child, Lucas, was 13, caught between childhood and defiance, often leaving the table before finishing breakfast. That morning, Lucas had already gone. The silence between Anna and Daniel wasn't cold, just familiar. Marriage, she used to think, was less about constant passion and more about the small daily choices not to leave. Daniel checked his watch. "Gotta head out early. We're starting the foundation on that new shopping plaza off Route 12. She nodded, tying her robe a little tighter. "Be careful on that side, okay? You said they're short-staffed." He kissed her forehead, quick, distracted, then grabbed his lunch pail and keys. When the screen door slammed behind him, Anna stood in the kitchen, letting the silence settle. It was so ordinary that she didn't even turn to watch him drive away. The day passed without warning signs. At 2:15 p.m., Anna took a call from a supplier. At 5:45, she closed the register, turned the open sign to closed, and drove home along the familiar stretch of highway bordered by tall grass and faded billboards. When she reached home, Daniel's truck wasn't there. Not unusual. He sometimes stayed late. By 7:30, she'd made dinner. The roast cooled untouched. The phone remained still. At 9:10 p.m., she dialed his cell, straight to voicemail. By 10:40, the worry started whispering, quiet but insistent. By midnight, it was screaming. Friday morning brought the police. "Ma'am, maybe you just needed some time," one of the officers said gently, standing awkwardly by the doorway. Men, sometimes. He wouldn't leave his truck, his wallet, his phone, his tools. Anna interrupted, voice cracking. He was fine yesterday morning. He was fine, but fine men still vanish. By noon, a search team swept the area near the construction site. They found the site empty. Daniel had clocked in, worked half the morning, and left around 11:20 a.m. Witnesses said he mentioned picking up materials across town. No one saw him after that. Not at the supply store. Not at any gas station. Not on any camera. He was simply gone. In the first week, Anna didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table staring at the doorway, convinced he'd walk through it. The house smelled of his things, motor oil, cedar-soaked coffee, and that scent became both comfort and torture. Friends came, then drifted away when the story stopped being new. The police searched rivers, checked hospitals, questioned coworkers. Theories multiplied. An accident, foul play, maybe he left voluntarily. But nothing fit. Daniel wasn't the kind of man to vanish. He'd just finished paying off a mortgage. His son's birthday was next week. Then, one late afternoon, a detective left a message. "We're still looking, Mrs. Whitmore, but cases like this, they go cold fast." Cold. That word froze her for years. 3 months later, life in Maple Ridge moved on. The news stopped calling. People avoided eye contact at the grocery store. The flower shop stayed closed. She couldn't bear to stand among the living colors while her world turned gray. Lucas grew quieter, angrier. At 14, he stopped asking about his father altogether. One night, she found him tearing old photos off the refrigerator, muttering, "He's not coming back, Mom." Anna slapped his hand away, then immediately broke down crying. They held each other in the dim kitchen, surrounded by the ghosts of their past life. Every night, she still checked the driveway before locking the door. Every morning, she woke to the same empty chair at the table. Grief, she learned, wasn't a storm. It was a slow erosion. 6 years later, in 2013, Daniel Whitmore was officially declared dead. The court hearing lasted 15 minutes. The judge read the date, the summary, and the phrase, presumed deceased. Anna signed the paperwork with a trembling hand. She sold a flower shop. Lucas, now a young man, left for college in Denver. The house felt too big, too loud in its silence. Sometimes she thought she saw Daniel in crowds, a tall man in a baseball cap, a familiar walk. Each time, her breath caught, her pulse spiked, and then nothing, just a stranger. But something in her never let go. She didn't call it hope. Hope suggested expectation. It was more like unfinished breathing. Spring 2023. 16 years had passed. Anna, now 54, had learned to coexist with absence. She volunteered at a local shelter, grew tomatoes in her backyard, kept her late husband's wedding ring in a drawer she rarely opened. One evening, her phone rang, an unfamiliar number from a rural area code. Mrs. Whitmore? A man's voice asked. This is Deputy Clark, Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. We believe we may have located someone connected to a missing persons case from 2007. Her heart stopped. There's a man living off County Road 9, the deputy continued. No ID, living alone. A neighbor called it in, said he recognized his picture from an old flyer. Anna's knees weakened. She grabbed the counter to stay upright. You think it's him? She whispered. We can't be certain yet, ma'am, the deputy said carefully. But you might want to come down here. She drove that night, heart hammering, through back roads she didn't recognize. The moon hung low over the fields, silvering the old barns and fences. When she reached the small cabin, 2 patrol cars sat outside. A deputy guided her up the porch steps. Inside, a man sat by a wooden table, head bowed, hands clasped. His beard was gray, his hair long, his eyes distant. Mrs. Whitmore, the deputy said softly, This is a man. Anna stepped closer. For a moment, the world tilted. The man lifted his gaze, tired, confused, and something deep in her chest broke open. Daniel, she whispered. He didn't answer at first. Then, slowly, almost mechanically, he said her name, Anna. And in that single word, 16 years of silence collapsed. She wanted to rush to him, to scream, to demand answers. But her body wouldn't move. He looked like a ghost made of flesh, alive but hollow. Where have you been? She managed to say. All these years, where were you? He opened his mouth, closed it again, as if the words had forgotten how to form. Finally, in a voice dry and low, he said, I don't know. Outside, the cicadas sang into the night, unaware that something once buried deep in time had surfaced again. The man she had mourned was alive, but the truth of what happened, she realized, might be worse than death itself. June 14, 2007, had begun like any other Thursday in Maple Ridge, but it ended in a way that no one could have imagined, least of all Anna. The sun had dipped behind the rolling hills, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. The neighborhood felt suspended in a strange limbo between ordinary life and the unspeakable. The crickets chirped insistently in the still evening air, almost drowning out the faint hum of traffic on the highway. In that serene facade, the world was unaware that a life was about to vanish. Daniel had left the kitchen that morning with his usual sense of purpose. Work boots, lunch pail, and a mental checklist. Meetings with contractors, deliveries of concrete, the inspection of steel beams at the construction site. Every step calculated, routine, familiar. But as the day wore on, the mundane rhythms of life began to fracture. 5:30 p.m. The construction site off Route 12 was cluttered with machinery, piles of gravel, and half-finished frames of steel girders. Daniel arrived slightly behind schedule, apologizing to foreman Rick Dawson, a stocky man in his 50s with a permanent frown etched into his face. Afternoon, actually, Daniel had said, brushing sawdust off his hands. Traffic was worse than usual. Rick nodded, checking his clipboard. We're behind schedule, Danny. Can you finish inspecting the west section before dusk? Yeah, no problem. Daniel replied, rolling up his sleeves. "I'll take a look." No one could have known that this would be the last time they saw him. The hours passed like any normal workday. Daniel moved from site to site, speaking with laborers, jotting notes, checking measurements. He waved to a passing truck driver, smiled at the apprentice learning the ropes, carried himself with the steady calm that had defined his life. Around 11:20 a.m., according to time-stamp surveillance at the local supply store, Daniel left to pick up materials for the next phase of construction. It was the last recorded moment anyone would have of him. A brief silhouette in the parking lot, casual, unsuspecting. From that point forward, he became a ghost. The first hours after he didn't return were marked by confusion. Anna called his cell repeatedly. Each ring answered with silence. By 8 p.m., she had enlisted the help of neighbors, checking his usual haunts. The convenience store, the diner, the gas station. Nothing. By 10 p.m., a gnawing fear had settled in her chest. It was no longer worry. It was something darker, more primal. The kind of fear that creeps into your bones and refuses to leave. She called the police. The dispatcher took her statement, calm and routine in tone, unaware that this would spiral into one of the most prolonged mysteries Maple Ridge had ever witnessed. The first night was endless. The house hummed with the sound of a refrigerator and the faint ticking of a wall clock. Anna paced the living room, occasionally glancing out the window at the empty driveway. She tried to make sense of it. He could be at Rick's, helping with overtime. Maybe traffic held him up. Maybe. But each rational thought was countered by the eerie emptiness around her. Lucas, 13 and already perceptive beyond his years, asked quietly from his bedroom, "Mom, where's Dad?" Anna froze. Words failed her. She wanted to assure him that everything was fine, that it was just a minor delay. Instead, she whispered, "I don't know, sweetie. I really don't know." The helplessness in her voice was reflected in his eyes. That night, neither of them slept. The following day, the search began in earnest. Detectives Carl Henley and Samantha Reyes arrived at the house at dawn, notebooks in hand, ready to document every minute of the disappearance. They asked questions Anna had already asked herself 100 times. Did he leave a note? Was he acting differently recently? Any enemies? Any threats? Anna shook her head. Daniel had no reason to leave. No quarrels, no debts, no signs of distress. The officers fanned out, interviewing coworkers, friends, and neighbors. They went to the construction site, scanned the tool shed, the machinery, the half-built frames. Every detail was cataloged, photographed, recorded. Every witness remembered the same thing. Daniel Whitmore had arrived that morning, worked, left for materials, and disappeared. As hours turned into days, hope became a fragile, flickering thing. Maps were printed. Flyers were posted. Local news ran a brief segment on the evening broadcast. Volunteers canvassed the area. Yet every search yielded the same result. Absence. Anna's routine fractured. She barely ate. Her eyes became perpetually rimmed with red. She stopped managing the flower shop, relying on neighbors to tend to the plants she could no longer face. Her world shrank to the boundaries of her home, a cage of grief, suspicion, and unanswered questions. Lucas, meanwhile, began to oscillate between anger and despair. He would mutter accusations under his breath. He didn't care about us. He left us. And Anna, hearing those words, felt her heart fracture further. Week 2 brought a small, haunting clue. Daniel's truck had been spotted at a gas station 7 miles outside town, abandoned, keys still in the ignition. Investigators found nothing else. No wallet, no phone, no indication of where he'd gone next. It was as if he had evaporated into thin air. Theories multiplied. Foul play. A random accident in the countryside. Voluntary disappearance. But each hypothesis was weighed against everything they knew of Daniel's character. Honest, dependable, gentle. Nothing fit. Anna refused to accept theories. She clung to one small, irrational belief that he would return. That he would walk through the door any second, laughing off the panic, apologizing for the worry he had caused. Nights blurred into weeks. She would sit on the porch, holding a cup of cold coffee, staring at the dark outline of the trees beyond the yard. Sometimes she imagined his silhouette on the horizon. Sometimes she screamed into the wind, wishing someone, anyone, could bring him back. Detectives made calls. They checked hospitals, shelters, every public record they could access. Leads appeared, then vanished. Sightings were reported and dismissed. A neighbor swore they saw him walking along a country road, wearing a dark jacket. Another insisted it was someone else entirely. Anna took meticulous notes, recording every phone call, every fleeting sighting. She taped flyers to every pole she passed, praying for answers that never came. By the end of the month, the local media had all but moved on. Maple Ridge returned to its sleepy rhythms. Children played in backyards. Dogs barked in the evening. And in her home, Anna sat at the table, surrounded by photographs, by reminders of a life that had ended without explanation. She learned to live within the absence, the empty chair, the silent phone, the echo of footsteps that would never return. But hope, stubborn and tenacious, refused to die completely. 16 years later, that hope would lead her down back roads she had not traversed in decades, to a man who had survived the unimaginable in solitude, and to answers that would shatter her and perhaps, in their revelation, finally begin to heal her. The years stretched ahead like a long, unending road, each day a quiet echo of the one before. For Anna Whitmore, time had no mercy. Each sunrise reminded her that Daniel had not returned, each sunset deepened the void where he once had been. After the first frantic weeks, the police investigation waned. Leads grew cold. Sightings turned into whispers, whispers into rumors. The community, once curious, slowly returned to their routines. Life in Maple Ridge proceeded as if nothing had happened. But for Anna, everything had changed. 2008, 1 year later. The first anniversary of Daniel's disappearance arrived with heavy clouds and a thin drizzle that mirrored Anna's inner landscape. She visited a construction site where it had last been seen, now partially dismantled, replaced by a new office building that had no memory of the man who vanished within its frames. Detective Carl Henley stopped by that day. "We're still checking," he said gently, though the lines around his eyes betrayed the truth. "Cold cases rarely warm again. Anything new, anything at all, we'll call you." Anna nodded, clutching a small folder she had carried for months. Printed flyers, witness statements, every scrap of paper that might hold a clue. I need to know he's alive," she whispered. Henley looked at her with that professional empathy only a veteran cop could muster. "Sometimes the only thing we can know is that we tried. That's all anyone can promise." But that promise was a whisper against the roar of grief that filled Anna's life. 2009, 2 years later. Lucas, now 15, had retreated into himself. He would speak only when necessary, and even then his words were clipped. He spent hours wandering the neighborhood, headphones in, eyes scanning for signs of father who might never appear. Anna found solace in her routines. She reopened the flower shop for a few hours each week, tended to roses and tulips as if their growth could mirror hope. Yet at night, she sat in the darkened house, staring at the empty chair at the kitchen table. Community support waned. Friends avoided her gaze. Casual acquaintances no longer knew what to say. Even a local newspaper moved on, replacing missing person updates with stories of local fairs and sports victories. Anna began to document everything herself. She kept a journal, daily notes on her feelings, the faintest flickers of possible sightings, descriptions of strangers who might have been Daniel. She cataloged phone calls from the police, old emails, and letters she had written and never sent. Each entry ended with the same plea: "Come back, please." 2011, 4 years later. The investigation had reached a standstill. Detectives Reyes and Henley had transferred to other cases, and new officers were assigned, polite but distant. Anna's life had become a delicate balancing act between hope and despair. She hired a private investigator, a retired detective named Samuel Green, known for locating missing persons long after the trail had gone cold. Green's methods were meticulous. He pored over city records, interviewed every neighbor who might remember seeing Daniel, traced his known friends and acquaintances. Weeks turned into months, months into years. Green uncovered nothing substantial. Every lead was either dead or led to someone else entirely. One night, after another fruitless search, Green handed Anna a photograph, a blurred image of a man in a worn jacket, standing outside a small country cabin. The details were indistinct, the face shadowed, but Anna stared at it until tears blurred the edges. "It could be him," Green said quietly. "Or it could be a man who looks like him." Anna held the photo close to her chest that night. Sleep was impossible. The faint glimmer of possibility refused to die. 2013, 6 years later. The court declared Daniel legally dead. The judge's decision, a formality meant to provide closure, brought no peace. Anna signed the papers with trembling hands, but she never truly let go. Lucas left for college, a young man carrying the invisible weight of a father's absence. The house, too large and too quiet, became unbearable. Anna sold it, leaving behind memories stitched into every corner, every floorboard, every faded wallpaper pattern. Even in Denver, Lucas remained in touch, though his calls became less frequent, less detailed. He was building his life, but the shadow of his father lingered, shaping his choices, his mistrust, his hesitation. 2015, 8 years later. Anna began volunteering at the Jefferson County shelter, working with children who had been lost in their own ways. She found purpose in the mundane, distributing meals, reading to the kids, fixing broken toys. Yet every task reminded her of what she had lost. The routine she had once shared with Daniel, the small domestic rituals that had once defined their life. She maintained her own network of information, combing through local obituaries, missing persons reports, and online forums for anyone who might have encountered Daniel. Every tip, every fleeting rumor, she treated with cautious optimism. Some led nowhere. Others were false alarms that reopened old wounds. Her friends had long stopped asking questions. They assumed Daniel was gone. Only Anna refused to assume, refused to give up. 2018, 11 years later, a retired neighbor called her one evening. "I saw a man on County Road 9, he said, his voice hesitant. "He's been living in that old cabin for a while. Thought he looked familiar." Anna's hand shook. "Describe him," she demanded. "Old, gray-haired, solitary." Her breath caught. Could it be Daniel? Changed and worn by years and solitude? She didn't know. The neighbor couldn't be certain. Still, the information lit a fire in her chest. Green, her private investigator, was notified immediately. He made discreet inquiries. The trail was faint but real. Faint, but the first tangible lead in over a decade. 2020, 13 years later. Anna had grown leaner. The lines of stress and grief etched deeply into her face. Yet in her eyes, an unbroken determination glimmered. She prepared meticulously for any possible encounter. Her heart held equal measures of hope and fear. Hope that Daniel was alive. Fear what 16 years of solitude had done to them. She visited local authorities regularly, rechecking permits, property records, and utility bills in rural Jefferson County. Small patterns emerged. A cabin consistently supplied with water and electricity. Someone registered in the area matching Daniel's description. It was maddeningly slow, frustrating, yet undeniably progress. 2023, 16 years later. Anna received a call from Deputy Clark that would change everything. The cabin on County Road 9 was no longer just a rumor. It was a reality. Every year of searching, every night spent staring at the empty driveway, every tear, every whisper of hope had led her to this moment. Driving through the winding back roads, she felt a combination of dread and anticipation. Each mile brought her closer to answers, but also closer to a confrontation with the past that might shatter whatever fragile equilibrium remained in her heart. She could see the silhouette of the cabin as twilight settled. 2 patrol cars were parked outside, deputies waiting. And inside, she would finally find the man who had been gone for 16 years. The man she had mourned, searched for, and never stopped believing in. Time had not healed all wounds. It had not erased the fear, the grief, the longing, but it had strengthened something else. Resolve. Anna stepped from the car, clutching a small bag with essentials, her heart pounding, her breath uneven. She was ready to confront the silence that had consumed her life for more than a decade and a half. The truth awaited inside that cabin, raw, inevitable, and life-altering. The late afternoon sun spilled golden across the rolling fields of Jefferson County. Trees swayed gently, and the distant hum of cicadas filled the air. The countryside was serene, almost timeless, untouched by the relentless passage of the years in Maple Ridge. But serenity could be deceiving. Anna Whitmore drove cautiously along the narrow backroads, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles whitened. The dirt road crunched beneath her tires as she neared a location described by Deputy Clark, a modest, weathered cabin set back from the road, partially hidden by overgrown hedges and a row of tall pines. Her chest tightened. 16 years of searching, fearing the worst, had led her here. And yet, as she stepped out of the car, the reality of what lay ahead seemed almost impossible to grasp. The deputies waited silently on the porch, their presence both reassuring and tense. Deputy Clark approached her first. "Ma'am, he's inside. We've confirmed it. Take your time, but we recommend you don't rush in." Anna nodded, swallowing hard. Her heart beat unevenly, hammering against her rib cage. This was it, the culmination of years of uncertainty, of nights spent staring at the empty driveway, of whispered prayers that he was still alive. She took a deep breath and climbed the creaking wooden steps. The cabin door stood ajar, a faint trail of smoke curling from the chimney. The scent of wood smoke and earth drifted outward, mingling with the distant aroma of wildflowers and freshly turned soil. Inside, the cabin was simple, sparsely furnished. A small kitchen area, a table with 2 chairs, and a modest living space lined with old books and worn furniture. Dust motes floated in the golden light filtering through the windows, and the air carried a faint chill, as if time itself had slowed within these walls. And there he was, Daniel Whitmore. 16 years had passed, and yet the man who looked back at Anna from across the room was both familiar and foreign. His hair, once chestnut brown, was streaked with gray. A beard had grown long and unkempt, framing a gaunt face that bore the weight of isolation. His eyes, once bright and lively, now seemed distant, cautious, haunted. Anna froze, unable to move. Her throat constricted, and tears threatened to spill. 16 years of unanswered questions, of fear, of grief. And now, here he was, a living testament to all that had been lost and endured. "Daniel." Her voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. He lifted his head slowly, as if the sound of her name had reached him through the years of solitude. His eyes widened, recognition dawning, confusion mingling with a faint spark of emotion. "Anna." His voice was hoarse, dry, unfamiliar yet achingly familiar. Anna took a hesitant step forward. It's me. It's really me." He didn't move at first. His gaze shifted to the walls, the table, the small cabin that had been his world for so long. Then, ever so slowly, he rose, awkwardly, unpracticed in human contact. Each movement spoke of years spent in solitude, of muscles unused and routines abandoned. Deputy Clark gave a respectful nod and stepped back, leaving Anna and Daniel alone for the first time in 16 years. The moment stretched. Words failed them. The room, heavy with the weight of years, seemed to contract, pressing against it with memories both real and imagined. Finally, Anna spoke, her voice trembling. Why didn't you come back? All this time, we thought you were gone." Daniel's lips moved, but no sound emerged at first. Then, in a voice barely audible, he said, I don't know. I couldn't find my way back. I got lost, I think. And then I just stayed." Anna shook her head, tears spilling freely. "Stayed? For 16 years? You left us to grieve, to wonder if we had done something wrong." His eyes filled with tears as well, though they were muted, filtered through years of self-reproach and isolation. I didn't want to. I thought maybe I'd never see you again. And I didn't know how to—" He trailed off, unable to finish. The room fell silent, the only sound the distant wind rustling the pines outside. Time seemed to collapse. 16 years compressed into a single, fragile heartbeat. Anna wanted to rage, to weep, to embrace, to shake, to demand answers. Yet words seemed insignificant against the enormity of what had happened. She walked toward him slowly, each step measured, her heart caught between hope and fear. "Daniel," she said softly, I don't care how you got here. You're here now. That's all that matters." He nodded, trembling, tears slipping down his cheeks. For the first time in 16 years, the distance between them, emotional, physical, temporal, seemed to collapse. He led her to a small chair by the window. His hands, rough and calloused, trembled as he poured 2 cups of tea from a chipped kettle. The gesture was ordinary, domestic, yet profoundly human. It was as if time had been reset, but only slightly, allowing him to share a fragment of the life that had been stolen from them. "Why didn't you leave any note?" Anna asked, her voice soft now, less accusatory, more inquisitive. Daniel looked down at his tea. I couldn't. I was scared what you'd think. Scared of what you do, scared of me." His voice cracked. I thought it would be easier if I stayed hidden. Easier for everyone." Anna shook her head, overwhelmed by a cocktail of anger, relief, sorrow, and disbelief. "Easier? You left me, Daniel. You left Lucas. You left everything we had." He buried his face in his hands. I know, and I've carried it every day. Every single day. I didn't survive in the world, Anna. I survived in the silence. But I never stopped thinking about you, about him, about everything. Hours passed as they spoke, cautiously at first, then with growing urgency. Daniel recounted the years, the cabin, the small work he had done for local farmers, the sparse interactions with neighbors, the months that bled together in isolation. He had survived, but in doing so, he had been imprisoned in a solitude that no one could understand. Anna listened, horrified and compassionate, in equal measure. The man before her was broken, yet alive. Alive against impossible odds, and alive for her, for Lucas, for the fragment of family that still existed. As dusk fell, painting the cabin interior in muted amber tones, Anna realized something profound. 16 years of searching, of living in the shadow of absence, of navigating grief and uncertainty, had led to this fragile, miraculous reunion. She reached out and took his hand. "We'll figure out," she said. "We'll go back together. Somehow, we'll live again, Daniel, but not in hiding, not in fear. Together." For the first time since he vanished, Daniel allowed himself to hope. His fingers tightened around hers, a silent acknowledgement that, however broken, they had survived the storm. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Somewhere, a nightingale began to sing. Time had finally opened a door that had been closed for 16 long years. The morning after the discovery broke quietly over the countryside. Mist rolled across the fields like a soft veil, the kind that blurs the boundary between what is real and what is merely remembered. In the cabin, the first light found 2 figures sitting in silence, a woman and a man, both marked by time, both suspended between the past and the uncertain dawn of something new. For Anna Whitmore, the world felt altered, yet painfully familiar. She had spent 16 years waking to an empty bed, 16 years of searching through shadows, of chasing echoes that never led anywhere. And now, the man who had disappeared in the thin air was sitting just a few feet away, alive, breathing, fragile, a ghost made flesh. There was no celebration, no music, no sudden outpouring of joy, only stillness. The kind of stillness that comes after a long storm, when the sea lies calm, but the debris remains scattered along the shore. Daniel was alive, but life had changed him into someone quieter, slower, carved by solitude and regret. His world had become small, the cabin, the fields, the trees. His silence had become his language, his isolation his identity. As the hours passed, Anna watched him move through the house. The way he touched familiar objects, the way he hesitated before opening drawers, as if each movement might awaken something long dormant. It was like watching someone relearn the act of living. She felt both awe and sorrow, awe that he had survived, sorrow that he had lived so far from everything that once gave him meaning. Later, as she walked outside, the wind carried the scent of pine and damp soil. The world was vibrant, alive, indifferent to human pain, yet somehow bearing witness to it. The same fields that had hidden him all these years now stood open, honest, unashamed. She thought of the countless days she had spent searching. The police reports, the vigils, the sleepless nights filled with questions that had no answers. Every moment had been defined by absence. And now that the absence was over, she realized that its weight had shaped her entire being. She was no longer the woman he had left. Grief had changed her, molded her into something more resilient, more solitary, but also more uncertain. The life she had built in his absence, the quiet strength, the independence, the hard-earned peace, trembled now in the presence of his return. And Daniel, too, was changed beyond recognition. 16 years of isolation had eroded his voice, dulled his confidence, stripped away his sense of belonging. His eyes carried the distant look of a man who had lived too long inside his own mind. What united them now was not the life they once shared, but the memory of it, fragile, incomplete, yet indestructible. In the days that followed, the story spread quietly through Maple Ridge. Some called it a miracle, others a tragedy. The man who had vanished had been found alive, not in another state, not under a false name, but here, hidden in plain sight, in the same county, in the same world that had declared him gone. Reporters arrived, curious and insistent. Neighbors whispered behind curtains. The sheriff's department issued statements of disbelief. Yet, beyond the public fascination, the private truth remained painfully simple. Two lives interrupted by disappearance, now colliding after years apart. Anna refused interviews. She didn't need the world's attention. She had spent too many years being defined by loss to allow herself to be defined by reunion. Instead, she stayed close to Daniel, navigating the fragile terrain between what was lost and what might still be rebuilt. Reintegration proved difficult. Daniel struggled to adjust to the noise of the world, to phones, to traffic, to the simple hum of electricity. The modern world felt alien to him, a place he no longer belonged. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if each step risked breaking something sacred. Anna guided him gently through the motions of daily life. The first shared meal, the first walk through the town he had once known, the first glance at a reflection that no longer matched memory. Each act was small, yet monumental. At night, she would hear him awake, pacing softly through the hallway, the creak of the old floors marking his insomnia. Sometimes he sat by the window, staring into the darkness, as though the silence still called to him. She understood. Some distances cannot be measured in miles or years. Some disappearances never truly end. Months passed. The police closed their files. The official record would say he had chosen to disappear, though no one could ever explain why. Theories abounded. A breakdown, a fugue state, guilt, fear, trauma, but none of them captured the strange, intangible truth. Sometimes people vanish not to escape others, but to escape themselves. Daniel rarely spoke of the years he spent alone. When he did, it was in fragments, moments of clarity that rose like bubbles from deep water. The endless winters, the loneliness that pressed like stone, the days when he considered walking back, but couldn't face the world he had left behind. He had become both prisoner and guardian of his own silence. Anna learned to stop asking questions. Instead, she began to focus on what remained. Love, she discovered, was not a constant flame, but something more like light filtered through water, bending, refracting, changing shape as it moves through time. The man she loved had once been her partner, her equal, her companion. Now he was something else entirely. Part husband, part stranger, part lost child found again. She loved him still, but differently, with patience instead of passion, with quiet understanding instead of expectation. And in that difference, she found peace. Lucas visited that spring. He stood outside the cabin for a long time before entering. When he finally saw his father again, the years collapsed into silence. No words, no accusations, only the quiet recognition that the man before him was both lost and found, broken and human. For Anna, that moment, watching father and son in the same room again, felt like the closing of a circle that had taken 16 years to draw. But circles are never perfect. The gaps remain. The edges fray. The past lingers in the corners of memory, waiting to be remembered or forgiven. By summer, the cabin had become their refuge. They lived simply, tending to a small garden, fixing the broken roof, cooking meals by lamplight. The outside world receded. They did not chase happiness, only the small moment of peace that arrived unexpectedly. The sound of rain on the tin roof, the warmth of morning sunlight, the quiet companionship of two souls learning how to exist together again. Sometimes Anna would walk to the edge of the fields at dusk, watching the sky turn gold, and think of the years between, the endless search, the despair, the hope, and she realized that the journey had not been about finding him, but about finding herself. She had learned that love could survive absence, could endure silence, could even grow in the soil of pain, but it was never the same love again. It was something humbler, wiser, deeper, born not of longing but of endurance. As autumn returned, painting the trees in shades of copper and rust, Anna felt the quiet certainty that her life had come full circle. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but completely enough. The man who vanished had been found. The mystery had ended, though not with the clarity she once sought. The answers were imperfect, human, and perhaps that was enough. Daniel often sat outside on the porch at dusk, eyes closed, listening to the wind move through the trees. Sometimes she joined him, her hand resting over his. They spoke little. Words were no longer necessary. What mattered was presence. The quiet, enduring presence of two people who had once lost everything and still found their way back to something that could be called love. And when she looked at him in those fading evenings, she no longer saw the years that had been taken. She saw only what remained, the fragile, unbreakable thread that had carried them both through darkness and silence and time itself. That thread was love. Not the love they once had, but the love that had survived. The kind of love that endures when all else is gone. The kind that remains when everything else has been stripped away. The kind that asks for nothing but the chance to begin again,